Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and this is me giving my reaction to the latest MSNBC Politico Republican presidential primary debate. I'm going to kick off this little rant by saying that the debate was absolutely terrible. And this is in lieu of the almost as bad one that occurred on Fox not too long ago. I've always had this running theory about the media at large. It is they're not interested in politics per se. They're more interested in soap opera theatrics. And we got a mouthful of that this evening. All the questions that were asked were presented as gotcha questions, which I guess is to be expected given who was hosting the debate. When you have a ragtag group of kooky, out-of-whack, lefty academia types and card-carrying Jesuit liars influencing the ebb and flow of things, you're going to have a lot of nonsense. And that's what we got. We got a massive conflict between the two supposed front runners, according to the Antonin Mussolini-style media that we have, in Rick Perry and Mitt Romney, and it was much ado about nothing. It was a complete non sequitur. It was arguments over things that are largely peripheral. We have the media also harping on this thing that Perry said with regards to Social Security being a quote-unquote Ponzi scheme. The thing that I really don't like about these sound bites is that, to put it bluntly, they're lies, because they don't give you the whole story. Is Social Security a Ponzi scheme? Before we answer yes or no, before we bring all of the indignance and irreverence and emotion and all of this other stuff that comes with this so-called sensitive issue, I want to ask everybody something. Have you looked at the actual mechanics of Social Security? Have you looked at how the thing is structured? As a general insurance program, there are a number of very relevant problems with the way that it's structured to begin with. And you have to actually deconstruct the various laws that were passed in relation to Social Security over the past 6 or 7 decades to really fully comprehend what the problem is. Try and fit that into a 1-minute segment, and I will show you a person who has never lived on the face of this planet and never will. There is no actual dissemination of the mechanics of any of these particular issues, Social Security being the pet one of the moment. So there is no actual rational discourse going on here. All we have is an emotionalistic attachment to an idol on one side, and on the other side we have an unexplained opposition. As I've often said, there's no logic in politics, and this is the fault of the lamestream, or ergo mainstream media, and MSNBC is right in the thick of it. I've been on record a couple of times actually saying that I think that this network is a complete waste of time, and I think the reason why there is currently now a shakeup in the employment roster there is because the network is trying to recast itself as a slightly more left-leaning version of CNN, so they have to get rid of the radicals. You get rid of some genuine dumbasses like Cenk Uygur, but you also get rid of some fairly smart people like Dylan Ratigan, which is really sad. Personally, I think that Fox Business News, if they're smart and they want a larger audience, they will give Dylan Ratigan a slot on their network as a counterpoint to the typical neoconservative stuff, and someone who is more in line with the more libertarian stream on there, such as John Stossel and Andrew Napolitano per se. Now, moving down the line of the other candidates, I'm not going to talk anymore about the front runners. They're utterly meaningless and useless. They're celebrities. And like with all celebrities, it's all exterior and no actual substance. Michelle Bachmann. She looked like a potted plant up there, and was in large respect of the fact that Rick Perry was there sucking up the oxygen from everybody. And the problem is that Michelle Bachmann gets her attention by saying things that are outrageous. They're often outrageous and very much wrong, but they're outrageous. You can't really be outrageous when you have a kooky guy who talks very similar to the way that George W. Bush talks, saying things about such as Social Security being a Ponzi scheme and this and that, and by the way, I just had a huge prayer vigil right before I entered the race, and I had a bunch of kooky people who think that the Statue of Liberty is a satanic idol. I consider myself a pretty old school Christian, but you won't catch me saying stuff like that, because I like to actually analyze the particular nature of something before I rush to a judgment like that. And I will be the first to admit that there are things in this country that people cling to with a superstitious fervor, and I think it should be decried, and if necessary, do it from the pulpit at the church if you want to. But crazy is bad regardless to what kind of uniform it's dressed in or what kind of symbol it's touting as its particular banner, so to speak, be it the crucifix or the menorah or what have you. Herman Cain. The guy is a wind-up guy. He's a yes man. Says the same thing over and over again. He has conditioned his rhetoric specifically for the soundbite culture. And so what you get from him are soundbites. We don't have one problem. We have 3 problems or 4 problems. I'm going to list them all for you, and then I'm going to give you a quick 5-second solution that could mean just about anything. I cannot tell you what I'm going to do until after I'm elected and I talk to the people in the government. Or to put it more plainly, I have not researched this stuff, and I don't feel the need to, but vote for me anyway because I have a nice suit and a cool accent, and I was the head of Godfather's Pizza. That's what I get from him. Rick Santorum. Weekend authoritarian, weekday politician. Basically, his bread and butter is trying to control everybody else's lives and chime in occasionally about family values. From my standpoint, family values, great. Family values don't come from government, though, so if you're in government, you're talking about family values, you're talking about something other than what I'm going to be voting for you on, so it's a non sequitur. It's meaningless. It's irrelevant. John Huntsman. Basically a collectivist big government with an R next to his name. He criticizes Obama, but I'm willing to bet that if we nominated him and if he was elected, he wouldn't be all that much different from Obama. He reminds me too much of John McCain. I don't want to hear about it. Newt Gingrich. I actually am liking him right now. Not going to vote for him, not going to support him, but I am liking him right now because for all of his personal shortcomings and my very strong disagreements on some of his views on foreign policy and national security and civil liberties, he is pointing out the fact that the media is totally useless. The media in this country is hindering the political discourse. It is consciously keeping us from the truth with the smoke screens that are being put up, with all of the irrelevant questions and all of the sideshow theatrics. And then we come to Ron Paul, my candidate. When he was talking, he was good. He didn't get to do a whole lot of talking, but he did get some attention for himself by going after Rick Perry. I've gotten a couple private messages tonight asking me what my opinion is on this new tactic of going after the front runner. I'm just going to break this down into the simplest terms that I can here, and I'm going to provide a link in the description on this. The description link goes to a Wikipedia page on Machiavellian politics. We live in an age of neo-Machiavellian tactics when it comes to politics. Cunning and cronyism and your basic run-of-the-mill duplicity is what goes on in statecraft and in general conduct when it comes to government. And the only way to really combat that is to come out swinging with logic and truth on your side. And in a debate context and in a political context, that also includes going after the champions of Machiavellian politics. And I will tell something to all of you right now, those of you who are watching Rick Perry. Everything about the guy is Machiavellian. And you can look at that HPV vaccine thing as an example of this. This man says something because it achieves a certain outcome, but he believes something else because at his core he understands this to be what the people who are the real power players in this country want to hear. The man is a corporate crony. By a logical consequence, he is not a free market proponent. He is an authoritarian because he wishes to force a lot of the things that these corporations want to sell down our throat because it increases their market share, which means that they're probably marketing a shitty product. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to force us to buy it. Or they could be simply cutting corners and not want to waste money on advertising, so we'll just get the government to make everybody take it. We'll make out like bandits and we don't have to risk anything in the process. Basically, all of their competitors are getting screwed because these things tend to be no-bid contracts, so to speak. A crony capitalist is a fascist, and that's what we're dealing with here. But in order to pull off this kind of political maneuvering, you need a system, a philosophy that has a certain structure to it that allows you to dupe and fool people into believing that they're going to benefit from these kinds of policies. And that is where the Machiavellian model comes into play. I would argue that one of the strongest proponents of Machiavellian-style politics was Antonin Mussolini. And before Mussolini became the de facto dictator of Italy, he was, you guessed it, a journalist. Probably of similar caliber to the flock that are currently running amok on MSNBC, such as Rachel Maddow, or more likely the two Jesuit Irish clowns, Chris Matthews and Lawrence O'Donnell. In order to get past all of this nonsense, you need to draw attention to yourself, and in the process of speaking truth to overt lies, you need to mix it up a little bit. So, I'm fine with Ron Paul going after Rick Perry. I think he should do it even harder. Continue to go after him. Yeah, it might piss off idiots like Ann Coulter, but that is exactly what we want. Because if Ann Coulter is talking about us, even in a negative aspect, it's still press. And at this state of the game, with maybe a couple exceptions, there's no such thing as bad press. All press is good press, especially when you're being the subject of a media blackout. And now, real quick, just to finish this off, I'm just going to give you my thoughts regarding the post-debate coverage, which I actually suffered through simply because I hoped that there would be some mention about Ron Paul, and there was a little bit in regards to the panel, specifically with regards to Rachel Maddow. I have a love-hate relationship with Rachel Maddow, which basically is that I generally love to hate her, but occasionally I love some of the things that she says, particularly when it pertains to Ron Paul, because I think deep down on some level, she kind of likes Ron Paul. Primarily because of the foreign policy stuff and the civil liberties stuff. But hey, you know something? When somebody's right about something, I'm not going to give them a hard time about it, even if I don't like them. she brought up on two separate occasions the dust-up that Perry and Ron Paul had, sort of chalking it up to dissension among Texans. And I took very close note of the fact that Ed Schultz, Al Sharpton, Lawrence O'Donnell, the Jesuit, and the other person in the panel, whose name I don't care to remember, avoided really talking about Paul. Whenever this was brought up, it was talked about only with regards to Perry. I don't know if Rachel Maddow is being given some latitude by General Electric and the other stockholders of NBC to talk about these things and then have nobody else talk about them at all, or if she's skating on thin ice right now and might lose her job by talking about Ron Paul a little more than she's supposed to. But it's very obvious here that this whole thing is kabuki theater. It's staged. It's not real. And, when you bring Chris Matthews into the occasion, you know for a fact that it's not real. Nothing that comes out of that guy's mouth resembles the truth. The man wrote the book on how lies are a glorified and essential aspect of his brand of journalism. And he learned it at his Jesuit alma mater. But for the most part, the entire post-debate coverage was an echo chamber of Perry versus Romney, Perry versus Romney. Oh no, Social Security might be altered. Perry versus Romney, Perry versus Romney. Occasionally, John Huntsman, because we like him, because he's probably one of us. And oh look, Michelle Bachmann is fading. But we're not going to talk about anybody else. Part of me just wants to throw my TV set out the window and just get all of my news from the internet. But another part of me says I should keep the TV around just for those few occasions where something actually gets trotted out that resembles the truth. I was actually watching an old interview that Frank Zappa did where he actually talked about how you tend to get the truth in little snippets. This is a rough paraphrase, by the way. The truth kind of trickles out of these networks, but it's covered with tons of spin, and you really have to figure out how to filter through all of that stuff, and it's a very, very daunting task. I don't recommend most people new to this try this, particularly with MSNBC, because those people love bullshit like a outhouse loves people shit. But I think that it can be disseminated if a person is adept in critical thinking, and I don't think critical thinking really goes on in most people's minds when they're watching these shows. These shows are tailored towards people with short attention spans and limited IQ. A lot of Amazing Atheist fans watch the mainstream media for that very reason. So, just to sum up, the debate sucked. Ron Paul ruled when he was allowed to. QED. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.